It's time for tiles. I have to tile the floor as well as 3 of the 4 walls in here, and that means I'm going to start with the wall. Now the ceiling isn't level, it's lower there, higher there, so I have to kind of cut tiles somewhere in the room. And I think rule of thumb is to put them at the bottom, to have kind of like full tiles at the top where you see them a lot more often. There is one wall that I'm not going to tile. That's the one behind me where the radiator is going to go. That one will have skirting tiles though. The skirting tiles I figure will be 8 centimeters in height. That's a pleasant enough height to look at. And that means that I'm going to run a sort of like a row of tiles, all 8 centimeters in height around the bottom for a more unified look. And I've already made my mark here. That's what I'm going to work off of. Now, because I'm starting with the walls instead of the floor, as I think that's another rule of thumb, I'm also going to start in the middle of the wall, not run the corners. I think if this were a floor, we would start in the corners, this being a wall, starting in the middle, and that would be here. So first of all, cut all my skirting tiles to 8 centimeters, make sure that they will have the right length. Mix some glue, put those on first, and then work my way up.
Once the measurement is decided, transferring it onto the tile and marking the cut lines is an easy enough job. Where this process gets frustrating is at the cutting proper, because having a tile cutter that is A, of low quality, and B, way too small for the job really does not yield good results. The main problem I had with this particular tile cutter, which in my unlimited cluelessness I had picked up from B&Q years ago, was that it simply would not cut straight lines, especially on longer tiles. Somehow the 2 rails, which are really just thin hollow tubes, as well as the base, bent, resulting in a score that would always be curved and about 2 millimeters off where it should have been. The scoring blade may also have been dull, I'm not sure, but the cutter not being the most stable also led to spiderweb cracks during breaking, when the tile should have broken along the marked and scored line, as measured. So I went ahead and ordered a more professional tile cutter, and after that this particular problem ceased. And after giving the B&Q cutter a full honest discharge, I went on with the job.
Right, so somehow I managed to make my tile cuttings for the skirt right without breaking too many tiles, and put some spaces under them to make sure that they all align along the top edge, and put those little cross thingies in between them to make sure that they all fit properly, which they do. So what I'm going to do now is make some adhesive, and then I'll put these in. I put in this additional line of tiles last night. The adhesive is actually still not dry. Before I get on with the next row, what I need to do is make a tile that has all the necessary cutouts for the screws and pipes. That's going to be interesting because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. These 4 screws or bolts here, I should be able to drill in with just a normal drill bit. These here will require hole saws, and it's all on one tile. Now because this is level, the alignment between the bolts is level, I should be able to just go with a 90-degree square from my two markings for the bolts here, get them across, and that should give me my drill spots there for the other two bolts. Now for the bigger holes, what I'll need is one of these hole saws. This one is a 25mm one. There's this pilot bit and has a bit of a sponge in here to soak in water to provide some cooling. So thankfully I managed to drill all the holes into that one tile without breaking it. That's good. I made sure it fits and that the cutouts align with the holes and fixtures in the wall. So I'm going to take that back off now and then glue in the second, well, maybe third row. Now, one thing I always underestimate is how long it takes to do this. Now that this is looking pretty unclean, like as soon as this has hardened enough, I'm going to give this a good scrub with a wet sponge, just to get those adhesive leftovers off the tiles. Now this here is a rather complex water tile, because every single tile here will need to be cut. Definitely the ones along the sides, and then the cutouts for the installations. Then there are several ways to do this, particularly around this here. There is two water connections, and then there's those bolts, and they all go into one tile, so there's a lot of potential here for screw-ups. And there's two distinct ways to get the markings onto the tile. First, I could uninstall all of those, then use a laser level to put the crosshairs or the cross beams straight into the center of each of those openings, and then put the tile on after each one, leave the laser where it is, and then just make a mark where the laser beams meet. Or I could use the low-tech approach, which is to do some scribing, and I think that's what I'll do. I really can't wait for this to be done. I absolutely hate tiling. And before the floor tiles go in, I want to put down some anti-crack matting that does exactly what the name says. It prevents floor tiles from being cracked. Since I'm going to use mosaic tiles, the risk is probably not that high because there's a lot of little grout gaps and stuff. But still, I want to do this right, so the matting goes in. Now the bed of adhesive is supposed to be really thin. Per the instructions, it's a 4mm trowel. Alright then, let's get this going. So that's what that looks like after it's dried. And I've made a fresh batch of tile adhesive and glued the mattings down to floor, and because the matting slightly curls up because it's stored as a roll, I've put down this plywood sheet and some heavy stuff to weigh it all down, keep it in place until the tile adhesive is set, and that should then hold it in place pretty much forever. Also, I'm using this plywood plank here to then later step onto this, because as per the manufacturer's instructions, point loads are to be avoided, so that distributes the load or my weight evenly when I step back onto it. I'm finally down to the last two wall tiles. Man, have I mentioned how much I hate tiling? The next thing I want to finish is the floor tile. So I have these mosaic style tiles, 50 by 50 mil, already laid out everywhere in this bathroom. This is the last stretch where sort of like larger segments still fit, and after that it's really just these cut pieces that have to go all around the edges of the bathroom. We're putting these tile spaces here, just there between these pieces, and making sure that everything stays nice and aligned when I use this rubber float to just press it into the adhesive and pull it towards these other tiles. They're easy enough to pop out later with a screwdriver or something like that. And this piece of tile here just makes it easier to spread the adhesive into the back of these tiles, because that is again easier than trying and squeezing the adhesive in there with a notch trowel. So I just spread it here, the back of these tiles, put them in, put in the spaces, press on with the rubber float, and done. Surprisingly easy. I imagine this would be a lot harder, but thankfully it isn't. Now today I'm going to try and plaster this wall here. I've smoothed this bit of waffle board out with just poly filler that I then smoothed with a really long trowel. Applied some plaster primer, and I'm going to use some roll-on plaster to go on here. So the roll-on plaster I had to once again order from Amazon Germany. I did find a few places in Ireland that had them in stock, at least theoretically, because when I tried to actually buy it, it wasn't available for delivery.
And in a pandemic where you're confined to your own home and can't go anywhere, that's not helpful. The last job in this phase was closing that hole in the ceiling where the power shower rope switch used to be. I used the back box as a template to cut a square hole around the existing hole, and then used the same back box to cut a square piece of plasterboard that would fit in the hole. I screwed it into the joist above and then filled the joints with joint filler.